It's a new day on Deep Space Nine and we're awaiting an arrival. Eggnog's on his way home after that whole getting his leg amputated thing a couple of episodes back. They all make a fuss when he appears and announce a party for his return, one Eggnog excuses himself from as he wants to rest. Looks like Dax either didn't hear or chose not to, as she's talking to him in the quarters he shares with Jake. Having a therapist on the station now comes with its downsides, and Eggnog being expected to talk about things is one of them. See, the leg's been replaced with one that should be working perfectly fine according to all the docs, but Eggnog's feeling enough pain from using it that he's walking with a cane. That's why Dax has been tasked with talking to him about why that might be happening, despite the lack of physical cause. He's already been talking with others for the best part of a month though, so would rather have some space. Dax agrees, but only insofar as saying she'll see him tomorrow. She leaves, and Eggnog starts listening to a recording of Victor Cheese Fountain once she's gone. It's 3 days later when Dax is telling Sisko that not only is Eggnog stonewalling her therapy, he's also not been seeing Bashir for physio sessions. That's because he's spending all of his time in his quarters listening to the same song, and it's driving Jake out of his mind. Jake agrees to continue leaving Eggnog alone on the condition that he'll bugger off to a holosuite if he wants to listen to the song again. Quark's is closed, but that's a mere technicality to Eggnog, so he boots up Victor Cheese Fountain's lounge program and goes in. A request for the same song as he was listening to before is accepted, and as Victor sings, Eggnog remembers Bashir playing it in the infirmary on AR-558 after he was injured. Mr. Cheese sings 15 different variants of it for him before taking a break to sit down. He asks about the leg, rumours being a thing he picks up while people are visiting, so Eggnog tells him about the pain and how all the doctors say it's not really there. Victor chooses not to question it and just says he believes Eggnog, which is a welcome change, and that might be why he asks if it would be possible to stay here for a little while. He wants to sleep, but the prospect of going back to his quarters with Jake doesn't appeal. Besides, Starfleet regulations say he gets to choose where he spends his convalescence, and there's no rule saying the place has to physically exist. Victor doesn't have a problem with the idea, so Eggnog moves into his hotel suite. Rom, the underappreciated brother, thinks his son has gone bonkers. Not exactly subtle, and a conclusion shared to a greater or lesser degree by a number of those present at the meeting, but Dax says this might actually be a positive development. Bashir's of the same opinion, concluding Eggnog is dealing with shit on his own terms, which means letting it continue for now. Standing aside doesn't mean giving no input, which is why Dax is having a word with Victor Cheese Fountain. She makes sure he understands Eggnog's cane is a coping mechanism rather than a physical need, and he has some ideas of how to help things along. Eggnog's settling in nicely at least. He's moved on to watching TV rather than listening to the same song on repeat for a start. Mr. Cheese hasn't got the time to join him as, after giving up trying to make sense of his accounts, he has a show to perform. Time off would be unprofessional even when hosting a guest, so he instead invites Eggnog down to the lounge. And if he's going to mingle with patrons, he should really dress the part. A cane with a little more class will better match the tux he'll be wearing, but Victor warns it might not carry his whole weight, so he'll have to go easy with it. Rather curiously, it looks like the holosuite isn't off limits to other people while Eggnog's using it. Jake brings a date to Victor Cheese Fountain's lounge and joins Eggnog at his table, despite a very clear lack of warmth from him. He leaves his date to go and fetch some drinks, so she takes the brunt of Eggnog's poor mood while he's gone. Hearing that Jake's talked about him before is a reminder of a life he doesn't want, and he snaps at her. Catching her looking down has him assuming she's trying to figure out which leg is the replacement. He forces the issue purely to fluster her, which is when Jake comes back with drinks. She thinks it's time to leave instead and apologizes for staring. Eggnog being rude to her again in the face of her apology causes Jake to intervene, which results in Eggnog tossing the table and twatting him. Mr. Cheese doesn't like people bringing beef into his lounge, possibly because mixing meat and dairy is against food hygiene regulations. He checks on Jake to make sure he's okay, then tells Eggnog to piss off somewhere else. The somewhere else is Victor Cheese Fountain's suite. Eggnog's apologetic for what happened and swears he won't be giving a repeat performance. Victor lets it go, partly because being tired is a new experience for him. The program doesn't usually run long enough for him to know what a full day feels like, and it's not going to end soon as he still has his accounts to do. Eggnog says he'll do that instead, which was likely the point of Victor bringing them up. A visit from Dax the day after has Mr. Cheese assuming Jake's made a complaint, but that's not the case. Dax still thinks it's an indicator that things are getting out of hand though, and it's time for Eggnog to leave. Victor's arguing on his behalf when Eggnog arrives to say he'll resign from Starfleet if she tries to force him out. That's enough for her to back off, leaving Eggnog to talk to Victor about his finances, specifically that he has a lot more money than he thought and should consider expanding the business. Montage time, and Eggnog's convalescence is filled up with building plans, relaxation, and hospitality, some of which he's now doing without the use of his cane. A visit from his dad is better received than Jake, and he comes with good news too, as he's been promoted. Eggnog suggests a party, only to be told that they already had one last night, outside the holosuite. Dax is here too and has another chat with Victor Cheesefountain. It's a different approach this time, complimenting him on how well he's done with Eggnog, as he's rarely using the cane now. She casually asks what his plan is for getting Eggnog to leave now he's doing better, then waves the question away after making sure it's done the job of making Victor realize it's time. Eggnog's in their suite together later when Victor finds him. Talk about plans for the new casino are gently brushed aside. Eggnog's given him the chance to experience life, things outside of singing the odd song, and he thinks it's only fair to help Eggnog back to his. When it becomes clear Eggnog won't leave of his own free will, Mr. Cheese closes the program himself. O'Brien finds Eggnog in the holosuite later after noting something wrong with the systems. Eggnog's trying to reboot Victor's program and failing, which O'Brien explains is because of Victor himself. If he wants to stay off, then he'll stay off. Mr. Cheese pops back in after O'Brien's gone to make sure Eggnog understands he's not going to change his mind. Cue Eggnog explaining he doesn't want to be out there anymore, not now he understands he's mortal. Losing his leg broke the spell, the belief of his invulnerability, and now he can't face the fear of death. Living a fantasy is just death in slow motion, though. Victor can't promise he'll be safe out there, but the alternative is just pretend. Perhaps he agrees, or perhaps he simply realizes he doesn't have much choice. Either way, Eggnog leaves. His family see him on the way out, and while he's not yet fixed, he at least now accepts there's something that needs fixing. Eggnog's back in uniform when he next goes to the holosuite. Perhaps that's why Victor Cheesefountain's willing to run the program for him. Eggnog's resumed his duties in a limited capacity, and he wants to thank Mr. Cheese for his help. It's not just words either. Eggnog's showing his appreciation with something more. Victor's program will now be running permanently, a way to let him continue experiencing all the things he's discovered while Eggnog was there. Eggnog departs to buy an apology meal for Jake and his date, so we'll leave Victor to decide what he's going to do with all the free time he's just been given until the next adventure. It's been a while since I've had a proper nitpick, so let's start with a continuity issue. During the scene where Jake complains about Eggnog playing a single song on repeat, we have some dancing isolinear rods. When he enters the room, there's a rod on the desk and one in the left slot of the data port. During a close-up, there are 2 rods in the port and none on the desk. Jake removes the left rod and places it on the desk. Incidentally, the cane is lower here too, but let's ignore that for now. We have the argument and Jake leaves after picking up an unidentified rod. Back to the full shot again, and now we have a rod on the desk and both slots of the data port are empty. I'll assume the detail shot was filmed first and somebody neglected to reset the rods afterwards. That might feel somewhat odd if they were literally the focus of the shot, but there are rather a lot of moving parts on a stage and shit happens. It's the sort of busy environment that would make Dax's pips dance around, for example. While I'm in pedant mode, let's have a real asshole one. Victor Cheesefountain says it's 1962 when Eggnog starts working on his accounts. All well and good, except that, as far as I can tell, the film Shane that Eggnog was watching previously wouldn't be broadcast on network television until ABC showed it in their Sunday night movie slot on February 18th, 1968, some 6 years later. Yes, I know it's a holosuite, but it's one of those little details I needed to look up to make sure, so now you have to hear about it as well. My thanks to itsabouttv.com for having a review of TV Guide issue 777 and user Jeff Parr on archive.org, who uploaded a scan of the entire magazine. Tangentially, I couldn't resist a little flick through the rest of the magazine because, well, spicy brain. Whilst that week's TV is notable for the very first appearance of a certain trench-coated detective called Columbo, there's also something on the letters page that might be of interest to many of you. It carries a pair of them threatening violence towards studios if a certain TV show called Star Trek is cancelled after only 2 seasons. For those of you familiar with your Trek history, you'll know rumours of potential cancellation during Season 2 led Gene Roddenberry to secretly start a letter-writing campaign. What we see here may well be a part of the resulting deluge. It's a small world. To the story, then, and Eggnog's convalescence after his misfortune 2 episodes back. The bulk of it is a further push from the writers to show war as a bloody awful thing, the same theme we've seen for quite some time now. In this one, we're deliberately destroying the idea that in a future where you can just strap on a new leg, physical injuries no longer matter. It's something Trek's glossed over plenty of times before, including on DS9 itself. We didn't get any mention of what Sisko was going through after he got shanked round the back of his dad's restaurant. No time for his psychological well-being when we've got a story to finish. This story goes some way towards redressing that balance and further expands on what it's like to be a member of Starfleet when everything isn't just a jolly road trip looking at new planets each week. Eggnog shows us the result of fulfilling the sometimes overlooked military aspect of those Starfleet oaths. The whole thing also gives us a glimpse into the world of Starfleet therapy, and in so doing, our first point of interest this episode. Eggnog states that a member of Starfleet has the right to choose their own environment during recovery. It's an interesting line, and one that makes a fair bit of sense. We're dealing with an organization comprised of many different alien species, so rather than having a one-size-fits-all approach, giving everybody the freedom to tailor their recovery is a smart choice. If there's a complaint to level at the way we deal with Eggnog, it's that his physical symptoms are downplayed by those around him. You could argue Victor Cheesefountain doesn't initially, but he quickly switches his opinion when Dax tells him otherwise. Eggnog's phantom pain, or to give it the current technical term, somatoform disorder, is never seen as anything more than a fiction to disprove. That might be an efficient focus on the underlying cause, but it's also deeply dismissive of the patient. Perhaps I'm allowing the experiences of people I know to colour my impression here, but it reminds me of how those with undiagnosed pain or complex needs outside of the norm are routinely sidelined by medical professionals. Either way, the result is a feeling that Eggnog was regarded less like a patient to consult on his treatment and more like a problem to solve. Even with that gripe, it still does a decent job of dealing with the main theme. Indeed, the DS9 companion book claims Aaron Eisenberg received compliments from combat veterans for his portrayal. DS9 once again covers a topic we may not have done justice to in the brighter, more sanitized versions of the Federation seen in other shows. That it does so by nudging the main cast to one side gives it the space to be more effective, too, I think. This was never meant to be an Eggnog and Victor episode, but rather became one during the writing process. There's a comment in the companion book that says, had the writers known the injury would result in a whole episode, they'd have had O'Brien lose a leg instead. Personally, I think that wouldn't have had as much of an impact as it does with Eggnog. We've previously seen O'Brien get put in brain prison for 20 years and be fine by the following episode. That plot armor of his, coupled with the O'Brien must suffer rule, would have made it just another thing happening to him rather than the life-altering event we see here. Part of what makes it work, in my opinion, is who it's happening to. There's one more thing to touch on before we go. We again give a nod to the ethics of self-aware holography in this episode, and without drawing specific attention to it. Victor Cheesefountain is aware of who and what he is. The time he's given here and how much he appreciates it gives us reason to ask about the morals of creating sentience just to keep as a source of entertainment. We've covered this topic before, of course, with the Doctor on Voyager, a sentient being treated as a tool. He had to fight for his autonomy, helped in no small part by the advocacy of Kes, against ingrained bigotry from members of Starfleet itself. Contrast that with what we get here. Victor makes no plea for freedom, no claim to rights of self-determination. Even without them, Eggnog gives Victor his autonomy. You could argue that makes Eggnog more observant of the Federation's stated principles on individual rights than any of his peers. End of episode.
Right then, have you figured out what we're doing, or are we off to Fairy Town again?
I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe I've come to a conclusion.
Yeah, probably just as well.
The alternative would have got us demonetised.
Go on then, clever clogs.
What's the next exciting twist in our tale?
We'll get to that, but first I have a question.
Elfif, what is it?
The search engine we're on right now, the one that'll take us to wherever we ask.
Providing we ask the right questions, because the internet's a shithole.
Okay, wherever we ask if we get it right. Anywho, how do you think it's possible?
Well, it just drives us there.
I don't mean the bus, I mean the system.
I'm not sure I follow you, son. What are you on about?
For whatever reason, this visual manifestation of the internet chose to represent search engines as buses, right? So there must be some logic to that. Buses operate on routes organized by someone in control. A bus can't go to the destination if it doesn't know what it is.
You're saying that somewhere out there, someone's deciding where the passengers should go?
Somebody's got to plan the routes.
So, to understand the system,
we need to understand who sets the routes. And for that, we'll have to go to the bus station.